not the founder of the feast, but instead the documenter of the feast. Our videographer for this past year is this gentleman behind us, the man behind the curtain. His name is Michael K. Anderson. He is the producer, writer, and mastermind behind The Wonder Show, and he's going to be sharing with us tonight. He's also been good enough to document all of this, so please give him a very warm welcome. Thanks, Michael.
Now, many of you, well, probably most of you haven't heard it, but I do a web series and a podcast called The Wonder Show, which began many, many years ago back when I was in college as a radio show. And as a poor college student, there was only one way that you could get lots and lots of music for not a lot of money, and that was to trawl for all the different vinyl shops in the city. You'd go through and there'd be, you could get 3 vinyl records for $1. And I remember there was a sign on one of the vinyl shops, and it said, "Sometimes the cover is worth it." And that's pretty much the mindset that you had to have going into it. That you went in and you got what you got. Sometimes it was fantastic, sometimes not so, and sometimes, well, the cover was worth it. And that's the thing about horror, is that it's all about the unknown. All about the things that lurk in the shadows, places that you don't normally go. And it was on a similar expedition to a local library. They were having a jumble sale, selling off some of their old hardbacks and softbacks for 15 cents for paperback, 25 cents for a hardcover. And I picked up a book called Freddy Plays Football, which I picked up solely because it had a picture of a pig playing football on the cover. It was probably the best 25 cents I spent that day. Because it was actually really good. It turns out that between 1928 and 1958, Walter R. Brooks, who many of you may know as the creator of Mr. Ed, but don't hold that against him, he created a series of 28 novels starring Freddy the Pig. And the Freddy the Pig series is a lot like an American version of The Wind in the Willows or Winnie the Pooh. It's about a bunch of animals on a farm, and the animals, of course, can all talk, and they get into adventures, especially Freddy the Pig. Freddy the Pig is not only a pig, he is a poet, a published newspaperman, he is a detective, a pilot, he owns a bank, and...
What? Capitalist.
Capitalist pig.
And in one of the spookiest novels that he wrote, Freddy and the Ignormus, he becomes the monster hunter. So I'll tell you a little about the big woods. If you follow along up the brook that runs through Mr. Bean's woods, pretty soon you come to a dirt road that is the boundary of the Bean property. The big woods are really a continuation of the Bean woods on the other side of the road. But as soon as you cross the road, you begin to feel a difference. No thrushes or peewees sing in the big woods. There are none of the rustlings and patterings that tell you of little animals going about their business. Except for the chatter of the brook, everything is still. Freddy the Pig and Theodore the Frog went more and more slowly as they approached the road. Freddy's jog trot slowed to a walk, and Theodore's long jumps became short hops that even the smallest grasshopper would have been ashamed of. They crossed the road, and under the shadow of the trees on the other side, they stopped. "Well, this is the big woods," said Theodore. "Yes, the big woods," said Freddy, looking around. The big woods. Well, well. And after a minute he said, well, I don't know how you feel, but I'm sort of tired. Long walk, hot day, and so on. I think I'll just rest a little here. And he sat down at the edge of the road. Theodore sat down beside him. And they talked for a little while about the weather and politics, about the coming out party that Charles the Rooster had given for his youngest daughter. And about everything but the big woods. And then Freddy got up. Well, he said, shall we go back now? Go back, said the frog. Why, we haven't been anywhere yet. Well, we've been to the big woods, haven't we? Said Freddy. And that's where we said we were going. We've been to them, but we haven't been in them, said Theodore. You wouldn't say we'd been to a show if you just went up and looked at the outside of the theater, would you? Look, Freddy, you want to explore them as long as you're here. I mean, you're so brave. I thought you'd plunge right into their very depths. Well, Freddy shook his head and said, well, I really don't pretend to be brave, he said, modestly. Well, you're not a coward, are you? Well, no, I don't think I'm exactly a coward. Well, you've either got to be one thing or the other, said the frog. If you're not brave, you're a coward. But if you're not a coward, then you're brave. Well, you can't be both. Okay, I'm brave then, said Freddy. But where does that get us? Well, it ought to get us into the big woods, said Theodore. Well, we'll see here. Let's just admit that neither of us are very brave and go back to the pool and be comfortable. And that's what they did. For the one thing that they knew is that the big woods was the home of the most horrible beast, the beast that everyone knows as the Ignormus. Pretty soon, all the animals around the farm begin to get robbed. Things start going missing, and the one thing that points to the culprit is a note signed the Ignormus.
The one thing.
Now, I'm not sure, I'm sure if any of you have seen an episode of Scooby-Doo, you'll probably see the ending coming. Not to give out any spoilers, but you have to go along. It's in the spirit of the thing. So, the one thing. Freddy looked around and talked to all the animals. The situation was really becoming serious. A number of the more timid animals were even talking about leaving the bean farm and going somewhere safer to live. And Charles the Rooster was going around saying that if Freddy didn't do something pretty soon, why, he was going to take matters into his own paws. So Freddy decided that there was only one thing to do. That he'd have to go into the big woods. And, well, if he went to the big woods and proved that there really wasn't an Ignormus, why, they'd think he was wonderful, wouldn't they? Freddy rather liked to be thought wonderful, and who doesn't really? At first he thought he'd tell everyone what he was going to do, so that if there really was an Ignormus and he got eaten up, well, then at least he'd have the fun of being praised a lot. But then he thought, well, maybe I shouldn't tell them, because if he chickens out at the end, well, maybe, it's better if no one knew beforehand. But Freddy, being the pig that he is, he eventually did go into the woods. And being the poet that he is, the one thing that he knows is to keep away the frights, is to sing a little song. And so Freddy went into the dark and scary woods. But Freddy trudged along steadily as he trudged, he made up a little song to keep his spirits up. It was something like this. It was dark in the woods. It was very, very scary. But the pig trudged along, always watchful and wary. The pig trudged along, and he made a little song. He was rather literary. It was quite extraordinary how he sang his little song in a voice clear and strong. Well, it's rather customary for a pig when something's wrong in a forest dark and scary, dim and dark and solitary, to sneak quietly along, not to be so very, very brave and bold and military. But this pig, he was bold, he was brave as a lion, and he walked through the woods without yelling or crying, until he saw the Ignormus. Suddenly he looked up at a slight noise in the treetops in the big woods. With a terrified yell, he leapt into the ditch and drove into the underbrush. For floating down silently like an enormous owl was a great white shape that hovered over him and seemed to drop and seize him. In the last horrified glance over his shoulders, he saw on the front end of the creature a sort of head and what looked like two long white horns. And then they were galloping and stumbling and tripping and panting. And, well, he doesn't exist, does he? Oh, I'll say he does. So he goes back to the farm. But he knows that the one thing that can work against the Ignormus is friends.
Oh.
So he
knows this.
and he brings along some of his friends, but first they have to rouse them into action. So Charles the Rooster. Charles the Rooster is the one that is the speechifier. So they go to him first to rouse up the animals against the Ignormus. So Charles the Rooster comes up in front of all the animals. And he sucks in his chest and he says, "My friends, enough of this. What of you? What of our glorious farm? Why, is our farm to go down in ruin under the onslaughts of our cruel enemies, the Ignormus? I say to you, no, 1,000 times no. Let us band together. Let us close up our ranks, resolved to do or die in advance of the enemy. Why, what do you say, animals? Are we afraid of the Ignormus?" He paused for a reply, but for a moment there was none. And the small rabbit in the front row said, "Yes." "That's the wrong answer," said Charles. Many of the others, however, seemed to agree with the rabbit. But Freddy went up to the fence and turned to face the crowd, which by this time included most of the animals on the farm. "What our young friend has said is right," he declared. "We are afraid of the Ignormus. I am, you are, even my gallant friend Charles is, although he hates to admit it." "I am not," said Charles crossly. "But," continued Freddy, "the greatest bravery is found in those who go ahead, even though they are afraid. That is what we must do. We must show this superior bravery. We must defend the honor of our farm. We must drive the Ignormus and his confederates from his lair. We must make the big wood safe for the smallest and the weakest animal who wishes to walk there." And a wave of enthusiasm swept over the audience, and they cheered and cheered. Freddy's eloquence had rather carried them away. He really had no intention when he started starting a crusade against the Ignormus. But he saw at once that the martial spirit must not be allowed to die down without action. If he did not lead now the animals against the enemy, he would never have another chance. For if he put it off even for a day, they'd become frightened again and they would leave the farm by ones and twos and families. They would migrate away, just as sometime in the past they had migrated from the big woods, and they would never come back. He had to do something. So that's what they did, and that's what we do against all the dark forces in life. We must band together with our friends, and we must go into the big woods, and we must fight the Ignormus, whatever it may be. Which, in this case, when Freddy found it, he found that it was a terrifying white shape that plunged down across them from the treetops. He saw it again. It looked as big as 3 cows rolled into one with a huge horned head that waggled menacingly. And when he saw it, Freddy said afterwards that his squeal was a squeal of defiance. He also said that he stood his ground, prepared to do or die, willing, nay eager, to have it out with this monster who for so many years had terrorized the countryside. But I think the real reason that he didn't run away at that moment was that he was too scared. He wanted to get away from that place as quickly as possible, but either his legs didn't understand what he wanted, or else they were too scared themselves to hold him up. They collapsed under him. The great white creature floated down and enveloped him. Now, I don't think that Freddy really fainted away, but it was certainly several seconds before he realized that he was struggling to get out from under what was actually a heavy fold of cloth. He kicked and scrabbled in a panic, and at last wrested his way out into the open air, and when he turned to see it, he had been wrestling with a sheet. Plainly one of the sheets that had been stolen from the farm. In each knotted corner of the sheet was a stone, and to each end of it had been fastened the tail of one of Mr. Bean's Sunday shirts. Oh my goodness, he said. The Ignormus. This is the Ignormus. Because so many times we are afraid of the unknown. It's just the fact that it's unknown. It may turn out to be nothing but a shadow of what you think it is. And in the end, he reflects on it with Randolph the Beetle. Hi, Freddy, said the Beetle. I guess you kind of forgot me up there when you were storming the big woods. After I went up that tree before the attack, well, it's all right. I got a ride down from other squirrels. Boy, that enormous hide is some hide, eh? Well, I said I'd get his hide, and I nailed it to the barn door, and I did, said the pig. Oh, good job, and yet what, said Freddy. Well, I don't seem to criticize, said Randolph, but after all, there wasn't any Ignormus, was there? Well, I don't know, said Freddy. There was and there wasn't, if you know what I mean. Plenty of animals were scared of him. Scareder than they'd been of a herd of wild alligators. Seems to me that if you believed in the Ignormus, and then why didn't go so far as you were concerned, there was an Ignormus. And it was just as terrible and horrible and ferocious as you thought he was. And it was just as brave of all those animals to go into the big woods to attack him as if it would have been if he'd really been there. I see what you mean, said the Beetle. The trick is not to believe in anything awful. Ah, yes. We'll take beetles. Nobody ever bothers a beetle. A beetle's life is just one long picnic. Well, it should be. You know, I think about it, why do beetles hide under the stones and duck out of sight when they see a shadow? Well, I'll tell you, they're born scared. Scared of things they can't see. Scared of things that aren't really there at all. Like Ignormuses. Why, if you could find one beetle that wasn't really scared of anything he couldn't see, why, that beetle would be king. Well, I guess you're right. There's always something to scare us, and it usually turns out to be nothing at us. Nothing at all. Ignoruses or sheets or whatever it is. We've got one Ignormus's hide nailed up there, but there will always be others, little ones or big ones. There will always be Ignormuses, said Freddy the Pig. And I personally think it was the wisest thing he or any other pig is ever likely to say.
Going for Michael Anderson. So one day you're going to be able to tell your children that you snuck into a tiny little science fiction bookstore in Dumbo while it was raining right before Halloween, and you had a guy named Michael Anderson wow you with the amazing adventure of Freddy the Pig. That was excellent, Michael. That was really, really good. There's a great writer and blogger on Tor.com where I wrote for a number of years and continue to, named Mary Ness, that chronicles and talks about the Freddy the Pig books. And you know, like, when I worked there, I often was like, I comprehend why this is good. I intellectually understand why this is good. But Michael, I think that you made me realize how to get Freddy the Pig. Like, now I get it. So thank you for that.